In his first major interview after taking over the U.S. war effort from General Stanley McChrystal in Afghanistan, General David Petraeus was asked on Meet the Press, this was last August, about Osama bin Laden and about the importance of the United States getting Osama bin Laden and about the connection between that and the Afghanistan war.
Is his capture less important today than it was?
Well, I think he remains an iconic figure, and I think capturing or killing Osama bin Laden is still a very, very important task for all of those who are engaged in counterterrorism around the world. Let's remember why we are here. We're here so that Afghanistan does not once again become a sanctuary for transnational extremists, the way it was when al-Qaeda planned the 9/11 attacks in the Kandahar area, conducted the initial training for the attackers in training camps in Afghanistan before they moved on to Germany and then to U.S. flight schools. The fact is that it was the Taliban that allowed al-Qaeda to establish its bases and sanctuaries in Afghanistan when it controlled a good bit of the country. And that gives big pause, needless to say, and that is why, again, this insurgency has to be combated.
General Petraeus saying there that the point of fighting the Taliban, the point of shoring up the Afghan government is so that what happened before 9/11 does not happen in Afghanistan again. What happened before 9/11 in Afghanistan is that Osama bin Laden had protection from the Taliban. He was able to set up his training camps there where al-Qaeda trained for and planned the 9/11 attacks. General Petraeus arguing that we have to fight the Taliban so bin Laden can't set up those camps again. And that explanation of why we're fighting the Afghanistan war is, frankly, consistent with what President Obama has always said about it, no matter what anybody else has argued about why we are still fighting in Afghanistan. Almost 10 years after we invaded, President Obama has pretty consistently said, very narrowly and very insistently, that it is about al-Qaeda, that it is about getting the people who attacked us on 9/11, narrowly speaking, and not letting them do it again.
I set a goal that was narrowly defined as disrupting, dismantling, and defeating al-Qaeda and its extremist allies. Our overarching goal remains the same: to disrupt, dismantle, and defeat al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
How does this advance America's national security interests? How does it make sure that al-Qaeda and its extremist allies cannot attack the United States homeland, our allies, our troops who are based in Europe? That's the question that I'm constantly asking, because that's the primary threat that we went there to deal with. Our core goal, which is to go after the folks who killed 3,000 Americans during 9/11 and who are still plotting to kill us, al-Qaeda. How do we dismantle them, disrupt them, destroy them?
For all of the other conceivable reasons why we might be in Afghanistan for this long, President Obama has always spoken about it very narrowly, about 9/11, about al-Qaeda. And now Osama bin Laden, the founder of al-Qaeda, is dead, which is leading to and bringing to light questions like this.
With al-Qaeda largely displaced from the country, but franchised in other locations, Afghanistan does not carry a strategic value that justifies 100,000 American troops at a $100 billion per year cost, especially given current fiscal restraints in the United States.
Senator Richard Lugar, Republican of Indiana. He is the ranking Republican on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Those are some of his opening remarks yesterday at a hearing on Afghanistan. Senator Lugar, you may recall, raised a similar line of critical questions about the cost of U.S. military involvement now in Libya. And with all due respect to Congressman Ron Paul, you need to know that Dick Lugar is no Ron Paul. Dick Lugar is not like the guy who's against every war. And Dick Lugar has not been alone among Republicans in raising questions about the cost, in particular, of the intervention in Libya and whether or not that was a good idea. Our past two presidential elections have largely been about Democrats criticizing wars that Republicans have defended. It is starting to look like it's not going to be that way this time around. Joining us now is former Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Steele. Mr. Steele, it is great to see you again.
Good to be back with you.
Do you think that 2012 might be different in terms of war politics compared to the last election?
I do. I think you're going to see it play out as an undercurrent in the overall debate about the cost to the American people of everything, not just the war, but the economy and gas prices. All of that's going to factor in. So I think you're seeing the predicate being laid right now with the killing of Osama bin Laden, Senator Lugar's comments today at the hearing, and the feeling amongst a lot of people, not just Democrats, for example, or those who have an aspiration to end the war, but those who really look at this objectively and go, okay, mission accomplished. You got the guy. The stated purpose has been attained. One little caveat. The reality that Lugar points out is that they have branched out. They have moved beyond the home base, if you will, of Afghanistan. So as we do, under the president's leadership, wrap up our presence there, we have to be mindful that al-Qaeda is taking different shapes and forms in communities around the country, keeping in mind that the 9/11 hijackers, a group of them lived literally 20 miles from my home in Laurel, Maryland, leading up to the attacks on 9/11. So that mode of operation is still very much a part of their agenda. So we've got to be diligent.
But the relationship between the threat of terrorism and war is one that I think people are getting sharper about, because nobody's arguing that al-Qaeda's presence in Somalia, al-Qaeda's presence in Yemen means that we should start a war in either of those countries. So when Republicans talk about Afghanistan, talk about the politics of this, is there a tension between the kind of argument that Dick Lugar is making, and that actually, frankly, that people like Ron Paul have been making, and the sort of Paul Wolfowitz, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, make the world safe for American democracy, big interventionist thinking?
I think that's an interesting tension within the GOP right now. Of course, you know, as national chairman, I've gotten a little trouble by expressing a point of view on the Afghan war. And mine was basically wrapped around the idea of not necessarily the cost of it, but what is our strategic purpose? What is the goal? What is the roadmap in, and most especially the roadmap out? And what do we expect to leave behind? The history there is not one where there are a lot of victors who go into Afghanistan. So I think that that's part of the tension that you're going to see played out, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Republican candidates for the presidency juxtapose their real view on what we should be doing there against an emerging establishment GOP view that we should continue to prosecute this thing all the way through.
Is that the establishment view?
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, I really believe it is. Keep in mind, now, the other side of that is that the president basically adopted, if you want to talk about the Bush doctrine, well, it has been basically inculcated into the Obama doctrine in terms of the strategies leading up to what we've seen get played out in Afghanistan and so forth.
Increasing the number of troops in
absolutely.
Afghanistan.
So the Republican leadership bought into that early on in the Obama administration, backing the president. Remember that time where you had Republicans standing with the president going, we support the president in his efforts here.
He's tripling the number of troops. How can we not support that?
So now you've got that piece having a question mark over it now that the war's over.
Yeah.
I mean, not the war, that Obama's...
For bin Laden is over.
Obama's done the deed. What do we do next?
Well, that is, and to me, what I see happening is that what we've been told, with no change in strategy from Obama, we've got a July date to start to draw down troops. And everybody's been wondering, is that drawdown going to look like this, or is it going to look like this? Is it going to be a steep drawdown?
It's not going to be
This, to me, buys him political capital to make it a steep drawdown, at which point you're saying the GOP establishment will come after him.
They'll fight that, and I really believe that there'll be some within the Democratic ranks who will fight that as well.
I do not think the Republicans more than it will split the Democrats now, don't you think?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, you've got some hawks on the Democratic side. They're a little bit more quiet than on their GOP
but after
side.
10 years in Afghanistan, nobody's going to.
But this is the point. That curve is not going to be a steep one. It's going to be a gradual slide. After all, you've got the leadership in Afghanistan saying, well, you really don't have to go if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Well, that is a reflection of back-channel conversations that are saying, look, we don't really want you to leave yet. We're not ready for you to leave yet. What are we leaving behind when we do go? A deadline is not necessarily a deadline when it comes to pulling our troops out and then maybe having to send them back in because something else flared up 2 years from now.
I think people are very happy to say, we'll come back if you need us, but we got to go. And I think the decline is going to be much steeper than it would have otherwise been. But we will see it. And you and I will fight about it in a friendly way when it happens.
We will.
Michael Steele, former Republican Party chairman, thank you for being here. Tomorrow, President Obama will visit Ground Zero here in New York City. That has some of his critics yelling about politics. Ed Schultz has some choice words of his own for those critics. It would be an excellent idea for you to tune in for Ed right after this show. Coming up next on this show, a Zen riddle. If two Republicans who do not hold public office indicate they're running for president while they know the rest of the country is obsessed with the dramatic killing of public enemy number one, do those Republicans need to say it all over again, or were they hoping we wouldn't notice when they said it the first time? Please stay with us.